Hi, I'm Samantha Mosier, and I'm a member of the Student Membership Committee at ABCT. I'm also an assistant professor of psychology at Emmanuel College in Boston. And this video is going to give you some tips and advice on preparing your application for a graduate study in clinical psychology. If you're a current college student or a recent grad who's thinking about applying, we hope that this will have some advice that's particularly relevant for you. In this video, I'm going to be focusing on the path to a doctoral degree in psychology. There are 2 degrees that can lead you to becoming a licensed psychologist, and one is the PhD, the Doctorate of Philosophy, and the other is the PsyD, the Doctorate of Psychology. There are also some other master's degrees available where you could go on to become a licensed counselor or a social worker, but today I'll focus mainly on the PhD degree. The PhD is a research degree, and it typically takes about 4 to 6 years to complete altogether. This usually includes about 4 to 5 years of on-campus coursework and clinical training and research, and also includes a final year of clinical internship where you're working full-time as a clinician. So although I don't have time today to discuss the differences among these degrees in great detail, I highly recommend that you spend some time researching and learning about them on your own to better understand which one might be the best fit for you. One really nice resource that you might want to check out is an online guide written by fellow ABCT member and professor Mitch Prinstein. It's called Mitch Prinstein's Uncensored Grad School Advice, and you should be able to find this just by Googling that title. So before I dive into this topic more, I'll share a little bit first about my path to a PhD in clinical psychology. So as a college student, I had decided to major in psychology, and I thought that I might want to be a psychologist someday. And I had heard that research experience was really important for this. So I signed up for a course where students conducted independent research projects with a professor. And that experience wound up being hugely important for me for a couple of reasons. First, I found out that I really enjoyed the process of research and could really see it becoming a part of my future career. And it also enabled me to become a co-author on presentations and journal articles eventually, and that opened up doors to other opportunities like obtaining summer grant funding, finding a job after college. And finally, it led me to ABCT. So my professor took some students to an ABCT convention in my senior year of college, and I became linked into this community of professionals and grad students who were at the forefront of their field and had so much knowledge to share. So after college, at the advice of my professors, I took a 2-year research position, a post-baccalaureate position, as a research coordinator in a program that studied anxiety disorders. And this gave me some really strong experience working in a larger scale research setting, and that enabled me to go on to receive my PhD from Boston University in 2015. So that was my own path to the PhD, and I highly recommend that you talk to your supervisors, your professors, your mentors, to learn about their own. Everyone's path is a little bit different, and there's a lot to learn from everyone's stories. So next, let me talk a little bit about what you can expect in a clinical PhD program. You'll be spending several years completing coursework, and along the way, you'll also be participating in clinical training, where you're learning how to conduct assessment and therapy. But what sets you apart as a clinical psychology PhD student is that you're also expected to be training in research. At the very least, this would mean that you are completing a dissertation consisting of original research in order to graduate. One of the great things about PhD programs is that tuition is typically covered by the university, and most programs will provide you with a stipend in exchange for your work as a teaching assistant or a research assistant, and in many cases, this is enough to fully cover your cost of living. One of the unique things about PhD programs is that although you're applying to a university or a college, you're also applying to a specific mentor, somebody who's on the faculty in that program whose research interests align with yours. So many students who are considering the PhD path start out by researching programs and learning about them, and that's a really great idea. So you can Google specific programs. There's also a great book called The Insider's Guide to Graduate Programs in Clinical and Counseling Psychology by John Norcross and Michael Sayette. It's updated every year, and it provides a really comprehensive overview of all of the graduate programs in psychology, with details like the program's specialization, their admission requirements, and their acceptance rates. So as you research different programs, you'll want to be sure that you're looking for specific faculty members. You want to be searching for a possible mentor whose research is interesting to you. And most faculty don't take students every single year. So you also want to be sure that the faculty member is planning to take a student in the year that you're applying. So sometimes professors will post this information on their website in the fall of that application season. Other times it's appropriate to send a brief email to the professor just introducing yourself and expressing interest in applying to their lab and asking whether they plan to take any students. As you're searching for possible mentors, you may also want to make use of the ABCT Graduate Mentorship Directory. The directory allows you to search for mentors who specialize in cognitive and behavioral therapies. You can search by locations, different specialties and populations that mentor serves, and you can find the mentorship directory by using the link below in this PowerPoint. And when you're doing your research on most programs, you may also want to pay attention to the specific program outcomes. Most PhD programs provide statistics on their website about how many people in their program complete the degree, how many years it typically takes to complete the degree, and how successful their students are in matching to an APA internship or passing their licensing exam. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about general life as a graduate student in a clinical psychology doctoral program, there are some materials compiled by the ABCT Student Membership Committee that you can find at the link below in this video. For now, I'm going to move on to discuss the important pieces of a PhD program application. So there are four main components that are most important considerations for a successful PhD program application. One is research experience. Another is strong letters of recommendation. Another is your personal statement. And finally, your academic record and your GRE scores. I'm going to be talking about the expectations and giving a bit of advice in each of these categories. Generally, when programs are evaluating their application, they're looking for evidence that you're capable of handling the difficult academic work of their program, and that you'll make a good clinician, and that you also have the potential to contribute to research in that area of your interest. On top of that, they're also often evaluating how well you fit with the interests and the specializations of the mentor you've applied to and to the program overall. I can't emphasize enough how much research experience is essential for a strong application. Programs want students who've demonstrated experience in research and who show that they understand clinical psychology research methods and procedures. They also want evidence that you know how to think scientifically. So one of the big questions that comes up is, how much research experience do I need, or what kind? And I'll say that successful applicants typically have quite substantial research experience. It's pretty typical that they'll have worked full-time as a research assistant in a psychology or a psychiatry lab after college for 1 to 2 years. If students are accepted directly out of undergraduate study, it's often because they've obtained fairly significant independent research experience in college, like they've worked in a professor's lab for several years and then went on to conduct an outstanding research project, like an honors thesis. Programs are really interested in students who have clearly developed some independent research skills. So helping a professor with their research as an undergraduate is a great step to becoming familiar with the tasks and the methods of research, but as much as possible, try to seek experiences that will give you greater levels of responsibility and some room for independence. It's quite common that successful applicants have been co-authors or first authors on poster presentations at conventions like ABCT, or that they've co-authored book chapters or even journal articles. And these types of accomplishments are one really good way to show that you've developed your research knowledge and your skills sufficiently that you're already making a contribution to the field. Finally, if you're leaving college without substantial research experience, it's a really good idea to build more experience before you apply to graduate school by seeking out full-time post-baccalaureate positions in research. These jobs are a really great fit for students coming right out of college, and they often have titles like research assistant or technician or research coordinator, and they can occur in a range of settings, from hospitals or universities to clinics or VA medical centers, and they often ask for your commitment of about 1 to 2 years. And these jobs are wonderful opportunities for several reasons. They provide you with more in-depth and independent experience than college research experience sometimes can, and they'll often result in you being able to help co-author publications or presentations. And they also allow you to work very closely with researchers and other faculty members who can then write you really strong letters of recommendation. And if you're not completely sure what you want to study or whether a PhD program is the right fit, they can provide you with some time to clarify your interests. There's a helpful article in ABCT's newsletter, The Behavior Therapist, that speaks more to the different factors you might want to consider when you're deciding if you should work full-time in a post-baccalaureate research position or apply to graduate school straight away from undergrad. You can find this article at the link in the PowerPoint slide. So a second part of your application that's really important is having strong letters of recommendation. Most programs will ask you to submit 3 letters of recommendation, and even if you're a few years away from applying, it's not too early to consider who your letter writers might be. You generally want to think about receiving recommendations from people who have been your professors or mentors in academic settings or settings related in some way to clinical psychology. And it's important to have at least one letter writer who can speak strongly to your research experience and your skills in research. As much as possible, try to ask people who know you well. This is a really good reason to be making an effort to get to know your professors and your professional supervisors. Taking a single class and going to office hours once or twice is not usually enough to be able to have someone write you a strong letter. So students at smaller institutions can be at an advantage here. Sometimes you might take multiple courses from the same professor or have more opportunity to interact if you're involved in your department's activities and student organizations. When you ask for your letters of recommendation, keep in mind that your letter writers are putting a lot of time and energy into your request. So ask them early. If possible, give them 3 months notice in advance of the deadline. And make sure that you're providing the letter writers with all of the information that they could need to write you a strong letter. You should consider compiling lists of what programs and what mentors you're applying to, provide your CV and personal statement, and a summary of any experiences or skills or strengths that you'd like to be highlighted in the letter. Ask the people who agreed to write letters for you what they want and when they want it and the format that they'd like it in. So next is the personal statement. And the personal statement can be a daunting part of the application. Programs may have different prompts for what needs to be contained in a personal statement, so make sure you read the instructions carefully and be sure that you've answered all of the questions and respected the page limits. But generally, your personal statement should convey 3 things. First, it should showcase your skills and ability and relevant experience without sounding like you're rereading your CV or resume. Second, it should communicate your research interests and your career or training goals. And third, it should demonstrate why you're such a great fit for the mentor and the program that you're applying to. Note that these 3 goals can be met without going into personal aspects of your life. So even though it's called a personal statement, It's important to maintain a professional tone and focus throughout the whole statement. So many successful personnel statements provide pretty minimal detail about one's personal life. And although programs do want to know what makes you unique as an applicant, going too much in depth into a story of your own personal therapy or a family member's mental health can sometimes take the focus away from your academic goals and your interests. It's also important to tailor the personal statement to each program and mentor that you've applied to. So for instance, you'll usually want to mention the mentor that you're interested in working with by name and discuss the different ways that your goals and your interests fit with the work that they're doing. So when it comes time to actually write the statement, try to write a first draft several months in advance of when it's due. You should expect to be doing a lot of rewrites and revisions before you arrive at your final version. And as much as possible, seek out feedback from professors or other professionals in your network. It can also be really helpful to ask for examples from friends or connections who have successfully gone through this process already. Lastly, let's talk about GRE scores and academic record. So these are important considerations for programs. Many programs use these to roughly assess the applicant's ability to engage in rigorous coursework and studies, and you can often find the average GPA and GRE scores of incoming classes on the websites of different PhD programs. So speaking very generally, because there are always exceptions, most successful applicants have GPAs of 3.3 or higher. So that might be something to aim for, but you should also keep in mind that this can be influenced by the courses that you've taken, and that a GPA that is lower than desired can be counterbalanced by having extremely strong research experience or great GRE scores. So most clinical psychology programs do require that you take the general GRE, which evaluates broad skills like verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning and analytical writing. And although this can be a tough exam, the good news is that you can take the GRE multiple times, and programs will consider your highest scores. So it's quite common for applicants to take the GRE more than once. It's difficult to make specific recommendations about how long to prepare for and when to take the GRE because everybody has a different experience with it. You might want to consider your previous experience with standardized testing. If it hasn't been a strong spot for you in the past, it might be an indicator to start preparing early and to give yourself enough time in your application process to retake the exam if needed. Some programs also require the psychology GRE subject test. This is a 200-question multiple-choice test that covers only psychology topics. And a lot of programs will say that the psychology GRE subject test is optional. So if everything in your application, such as your transcript and your CV, already shows that you have an excellent command and knowledge of psychology, then you may feel comfortable skipping the test when it's optional. However, if you're a student who didn't major in psychology or had a lower GPA, then scoring well on the Psych GRE can help show that you're truly prepared for graduate work. So what about clinical experience? So you may have noticed that I didn't include clinical experience on my list of the major components of a successful application. For PhD programs, it's not necessary to have experience working directly with clinical populations. It is looked upon favorably, but it's not expected in the same way that programs will expect you to have some research experience. Programs do want to see evidence that you have the potential to be a good clinician, but you can demonstrate this in a number of ways, including your research experience, if you interact with human participants, or your volunteer work, or other professional interactions. It could also just be as simple as having your letter writers comment on how easy you are to work with and how respectful you are towards your supervisors or your peers or your research participants. The last thing that I want to mention is the value of expanding your professional network and being a part of professional organizations in the lead up to applying. I know that networking isn't an activity that sounds enjoyable on the surface to most people, but think of this simply as getting to know people and staying connected to people who share your professional interests. This could be as simple as connecting regularly with former coworkers or supervisors to let them know what you're doing and what opportunities you're looking for, or chatting with guest speakers who come to your campus. Professional membership in organizations like ABCT can also be very helpful in a number of ways before you apply to grad school. So especially for students coming from smaller colleges or who didn't have a lot of networking opportunities in their campus life, membership and attendance at the annual convention can give you a ready-made community of people who are experts in the field and people like you who are going through the application process, or graduate students who have been through it already. So I'll mention a couple of aspects of ABCT student membership that are really great. So ABCT offers reduced fees for students and for post-baccalaureate research assistants, both for membership dues and for convention registration fees. And attending the annual convention is a really nice way to become familiar with the researchers in your area of interest, to network with others who have recently gotten into graduate school, and to figure out who you might want to work with and who you might want to apply to in graduate school. Presenting research posters at the convention is a really nice way to demonstrate that you've accumulated the desired research experience and can look really good on your CV or resume when you apply to graduate school. And another thing to mention about the convention is that every year the convention has a Getting Into Grad School panel. It's held Friday evening and it's followed by a poster session and networking event. So these events, the Getting Into Graduate School panel and the networking poster session, are free to students and they don't require convention registration. So you can learn more about when and where this free panel will be held by clicking on the convention link at the top of the ABCT homepage and then following the link to the itinerary planner. Members of ABCT also have access to special interest groups called SIGs. SIGs are small groups within ABCT that share interest in a particular topic. There are currently 40 SIGs, and they range from health psychology to Hispanic issues in behavior therapy to technology and behavior change. And the SIGs meet every year at the annual convention, and they're also active throughout the year on email lists and websites where they share conversation and resources, and they work on projects to promote their interests. SIGs also have their own research poster events, in addition to the general conference poster sessions. And SIGs meet during the convention, and students are welcome to attend those SIG meetings. Members of ABCT also have access to ABCT webinars and access to behavior therapy, which is the scholarly journal, and to cognitive and behavioral practice, which is a clinical journal. There's also an ABCT email listserv, which can be a really good way to learn about what's happening in the field, the types of events or discussions and questions that are being had by professionals. And you may also want to take a look at ABCT's job bank, available on the website. This has positions available that include those types of research assistant positions that we talked about earlier. There are also a number of free resources on the ABCT website that are geared towards students. Articles about whether or not to take a gap year after college, slang dictionaries to help navigate the psychology acronyms that can be confusing. And as I mentioned earlier, the ABCT Student Membership Committee has compiled some resources related to what life is like in graduate school and related to application tips. So this can all be accessed through the link below in this PowerPoint. All right, so that concludes our video today. Thanks for sticking with me through it. We hope that you'll find these resources helpful and will use them to guide your applications. We also hope that you'll consider ABCT your professional home, a place to connect, a place to get support for your professional development, and someday a place to give back to younger psychologists who will be in the position that you're in right now. So good luck and best wishes with your application process.